Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The bullet didn't kill him, but the betrayal shattered his soul into 1,000 jagged shards before he even hit the ground. Rain lashed against the panoramic glass of the penthouse, blurring the neon skyline of Neo's soul into a kaleidoscope of bleeding light, mirroring the blood pooling beneath Julian's ribs. He wasn't looking at the wound, though. His eyes were locked on the man standing over him, the man holding the smoking gun, the man who had sworn an oath to protect him with his life, the man who was currently looking down at him with an expression as cold and unyielding as a grave marker. "Why?" Julian choked out, the copper taste of his own blood flooding his mouth. Kalen didn't answer immediately. He merely tilted his head, the erratic strobe of the city lights catching the sharp, predatory angle of his jaw and the hollows of his eyes. He looked less like a human and more like a statue carved from obsidian and regret. "Because," Kalen finally whispered, crouching down so his expensive Italian leather shoes were inches from Julian's desperate, grasping hand. He holstered the weapon, his movements fluid and practiced, before gripping Julian's chin in a vice-like hold, forcing him to look up. To ascend, Julian, one must be willing to sacrifice the thing they love most. And you were always going to be my sacrifice. The fall from grace is rarely a straight line. It is a tumble, a series of agonizing impacts against the sharp edges of reality. 3 weeks earlier, Julian Thorne was the crown prince of the Black Lotus Syndicate. He was the golden boy, the strategist, the heir apparent to an empire of underground trade and digital espionage that spanned 3 continents. He was untouchable, or so he thought. He sat now in a chair that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime, yet he was a prisoner. The binds around his wrists were zip ties, crude and plastic, biting into skin that had only ever known silk and cashmere. The room was a safe house, buried deep within the industrial sector, a brutalist concrete box filled with shadows and dust. The door creaked open. Kalen walked in, carrying a tray of food. He looked impeccable, as always. A charcoal suit, a black turtleneck that accentuated the width of his shoulders, and silver hair falling just past his ears, framing a face that had once been Julian's favorite sight in the morning. Now, it was the face of his usurper. "Eat," Kalen said, setting the tray down on a rusty metal table. "I'd rather starve," Julian spat, turning his head away. Kalen sighed, a sound of weary patience that infuriated Julian more than a shout would have. He pulled up a metal stool and sat opposite his captive. "If you starve, you die. If you die, I can't get the encryption keys for the ledger. And if I don't get the keys, all of this, your fall, my rise, it's all for nothing. Is that all I am to you now?" Julian turned back, his eyes blazing with a mixture of fury and heartbreak. "A password manager? You are a loose end, Julian. I am trying to tie you up neatly. You shot me. I grazed you. If I wanted you dead, I wouldn't have missed the heart at point-blank range. I'm the best marksman in the syndicate. You know that." Julian fell silent. It was true. Kalen never missed. The wound on his side was painful, yes, searingly so, but it had missed every vital organ. It was a flesh wound dressed up as an execution. But why? The logic didn't track. If Kalen wanted the throne, killing Julian was the fastest route. Keeping him alive, keeping him hidden in this squalor, was a liability. "Why keep me here?" Julian asked, his voice lower, probing. "The elders think I'm dead. You could have just finished the job." Kalen leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. The air in the room shifted, thickening with a tension that was almost electric. It was the same tension that had existed between them for years, the charged silence of a bodyguard and his charge, of 2 men who danced around a fire they were terrified to touch. "Because the elders are liars," Kalen said softly. "And because you are not the only one who fell." "What does that mean?" Kalen stood up abruptly, the moment of vulnerability snapping shut like a steel trap. "Eat the food, Julian. We move at midnight." "Move where?" "To the one place they won't look for a dead prince and his traitorous dog." The journey was a blur of rain-slicked highways and the interior of a tinted SUV. Kalen drove with a reckless precision, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror every few seconds. Julian sat in the passenger seat, unbound now, but with the child lock engaged. He watched Kalen's profile, searching for the boy he had grown up with, the boy who had once bandaged his scraped knees in the orphanage before the syndicate adopted them both. They arrived at a dilapidated shipping yard. The smell of salt and rust was overwhelming. Kalen killed the engine and turned to Julian. "Listen to me closely," Kalen said, his voice urgent. "From this moment on, you are not Julian Thorne. You are nobody. We are ghosts. Kalen, what is going on? You take over my position, you shoot me, you kidnap me, and now we're hiding in a shipping yard? This doesn't look like a coup. It looks like a frantic escape." Kalen clenched the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. "It's not a coup, Julian. It's a rescue." Julian blinked. The world tilted on its axis. "A rescue? You put a bullet in me. I had to make it look real." Kalen snapped, finally losing his cool. He turned fully toward Julian, his eyes wild. "The elders ordered your death, Julian. Not your exile. Your death. They found out about your plans to legitimate the business, to go clean. They saw you as a threat to their profits. They ordered me to do it. If I had refused, they would have sent the cleaners. And the cleaners don't miss, and they certainly don't leave bodies behind to be buried." Julian sat frozen, the revelation washing over him like ice water. "So you shot me to make them think you were loyal. I shot you to buy us time. I had to make it look like I killed you so they would stop hunting you. But I missed the kill shot intentionally. I dragged you out, told them I was disposing of the body, and brought you here. Why didn't you tell me?" Julian whispered. Kalen looked away, staring out at the rain. "Because you're a terrible actor, Jules. If you knew, your eyes wouldn't have shown the fear. They needed to see the betrayal in your face for the surveillance drones to buy it." A heavy silence settled over the car. Julian looked at the man he had hated for 3 weeks, the man he had spent years secretly loving. The dynamic had shifted violently. Kalen wasn't the villain, he was the shield. He had broken his own heart to save Julian's life. "So," Julian said, his voice trembling slightly, "Jack and Jill went up the hill." Kalen huffed a dry, humorless laugh. "And Jack fell down and broke his crown. And Jill came tumbling after," Julian finished. "You threw away your position, your reputation, everything, to come tumbling after me." "I'd tumble into hell if it meant you were still breathing," Kalen murmured. The moment hung suspended, fragile and terrified, until a harsh white light flooded the interior of the car. High beams. 3 SUVs boxed them in. "Down!" Kalen roared, shoving Julian's head toward the dashboard just as the windshield shattered into 1,000 diamonds. The firefight was a chaotic symphony of noise and violence. Kalen was a whirlwind of motion, returning fire with a calm lethality that was terrifying to behold. He dragged Julian out of the car, using the door as a shield, pushing them toward the maze of shipping containers. "They found us," Kalen grit out, reloading his weapon with a smooth click. "The tracker. I must have missed a tracker on the car." "How many?" Julian asked. He didn't have a gun. He felt naked, useless. "Too many. 6. Maybe 8. Kalen checked the corner, firing 2 shots that were answered by screams. "We need to get to the boat. It's docked at Pier 4. Can you run?" "My side hurts like a bitch, but yes." "Good. Stay behind me. If I go down, you don't stop. You take the boat, and you go. Do you hear me?" "No." Kalen whipped his head around. "Julian, this isn't a debate. I am not leaving you behind. We did that once. Never again." Julian's eyes were hard, the steel of the future syndicate head finally surfacing through the trauma. "Give me a gun." Kalen hesitated, looking at Julian's hands. Then, he pulled a spare pistol from his ankle holster and slapped it into Julian's palm. "Don't shoot your foot off, Your Highness. Shut up and lead the way." They moved as a unit, a 2-headed beast of vengeance. Years of training together, of sparring in the syndicate's dojos, came flooding back. They covered each other's blind spots instinctively. When Kalen moved left, Julian covered right. It was a dance of death, fluid and beautiful in its brutality. They reached Pier 4, but the boat was guarded. 3 men, heavily armed. Kalen pulled Julian behind a blue container. He was breathing hard, a sheen of sweat mixed with rain on his face. "I'm out of ammo," he whispered. Julian checked his clip. "I have 2 rounds. 3 targets. 2 rounds. The math is bad. Since when do we care about math?" Julian smirked, though his heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. I have an idea. The distraction play. Kalen's eyes widened. No, that's too risky. You're the target. Exactly. They want me. If I surrender, they'll hesitate. That gives you the opening to close the distance. Julian. Trust me, Kalen. For once, just trust me. Before Kalen could stop him, Julian stepped out from behind the container, hands raised high. Hold fire. Julian shouted, his voice commanding, echoing the authority he had wielded for years. I am Julian Thorne. I surrender. The 3 guards hesitated, guns trained on him, confused by the sudden appearance of the dead prince. The director wants me alive, doesn't he? Julian walked forward, confident, arrogant. He wants the ledger key. If you shoot me, you lose the money. The center guard lowered his rifle slightly, reaching for his radio. Target secured. We have. Snap. Kalen launched himself from the shadows like a panther. He didn't need bullets. He was a living weapon. He struck the first guard with a bone-shattering knee to the chest, grabbed the falling rifle, and used the stock to knock the second guard unconscious before the man could turn. The third guard, the one with the radio, raised his pistol at Julian. Bang! Julian fired his single remaining round. The guard dropped, clutching his shoulder. Kalen stood amidst the fallen bodies, chest heaving. He looked at Julian, his eyes dark with a mix of fury and admiration. You are insane. I learned from the best, Julian replied, lowering his gun. They scrambled onto the boat, a sleek, unassuming trawler that had a high-speed engine. Kalen cut the lines while Julian fired up the ignition. As the engine roared to life, they sped away from the pier, the lights of the gunmen fading into the rainy mist behind them. They didn't stop until they were miles offshore, the city of Neosol reduced to a glowing smudge on the horizon. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by the dull throb of wounds and the crushing weight of exhaustion. Julian went into the small cabin below deck. It was cramped, smelling of diesel and old blankets. He found a first aid kit and sat on the bunk, his hand pressing against his side where the stitches had likely torn. Kalen came down a moment later. He looked wrecked. The invincible enforcer was trembling. He leaned against the doorframe, watching Julian. Let me see, Kalen said quietly. He walked over and knelt between Julian's legs, his hands gentle as he lifted Julian's shirt. The bandage was soaked with fresh blood. I told you not to run, Kalen murmured, opening the kit. And I told you I wasn't leaving you. Kalen began to clean the wound. His touch was clinical, precise, but there was a reverence to it. Julian watched the top of Kalen's head, the way his silver hair fell over his eyes. He reached out, his fingers brushing against Kalen's cheek. Kalen froze. He didn't pull away, but he stopped moving. You ruined everything for me, Julian whispered. My career, my legacy, my home. Kalen looked up, his eyes wet. I know. I'm sorry. Don't be, Julian said. I hated that throne anyway. It was cold, and I was alone on it. You were never alone, Jules. I was always right there, in your shadow. I don't want you in my shadow anymore, Julian said, his voice thick with emotion. I want you beside me. Kalen let out a shuddering breath, resting his forehead against Julian's thigh. It was a gesture of absolute submission, of total surrender. The man who had conquered the syndicate, who had played the villain to save the hero, was now on his knees, begging for forgiveness he felt he didn't deserve. We have nothing, Kalen said into the fabric of Julian's trousers. No money, no army, no home. Julian ran his fingers through Kalen's hair, tugging gently to make him look up. We have the ledger key, which means we have all of their money. We can disappear. Or. Julian's eyes hardened, a dangerous glint returning to them. Or we can burn them down. All of them. The elders. The director. We can take the hill back. But this time, we do it together. Kalen searched Julian's face. He saw the fire there, the same fire that had made him fall in love with the arrogant prince all those years ago. Together, Kalen agreed. He leaned up, closing the distance. The kiss wasn't soft. It tasted of blood, rain, and desperation. It was a clash of teeth and a mingling of breath, a reclaiming of ownership. Julian gripped Kalen's shoulders, pulling him closer, anchoring himself to the only solid thing left in his world. When they broke apart, breathless, Kalen rested his forehead against Julian's. I love you, Kalen whispered, the confession tearing out of him like a secret he had kept for 1,000 years. I know, Julian replied, a small, crooked smile touching his lips. You tumbled after me, didn't you? Every time, Jules. Every single time. 6 months later. The rain in Neo Seoul never seemed to stop, but the view from the new headquarters was different. Higher. Cleaner. The Black Lotus Syndicate was gone. In its place stood Vance and Thorne Security Solutions, a private intelligence firm that had mysteriously acquired all of the syndicate's former assets and none of its liabilities. Julian stood by the window, wearing a suit that fit better than his old crown ever did. He watched the city below, the ants scurrying in the neon labyrinth. The door opened. Kalen walked in. He wasn't wearing a bodyguard's uniform anymore. He wore a suit that matched Julian's, tailored to perfection. He walked up behind Julian, wrapping his arms around his waist, pulling him back against his chest. The board meeting starts in 5 minutes, Kalen murmured against Julian's ear. Let them wait, Julian said, leaning back into the warmth. I'm enjoying the view. The city? No. Julian turned in Kalen's arms, looking up at his partner, his equal. The reflection. He saw himself in Kalen's eyes, not as a fallen prince, but as a man who had survived the fall and built a castle from the rubble. Are you ready to go back out there? Kalen asked, his hand resting possessively on Julian's lower back. Julian smirked, straightening Kalen's tie. Jack and Jill went up the hill. Kalen smiled, a genuine, dangerous smile that promised trouble for anyone who dared to cross them. To fetch a pail of water. To drown the competition, Julian corrected. After you, Mr. Thorne. Right beside me, Mr. Vance. They walked out of the office together, not as master and servant, not as prince and guard, but as kings of their own making. The hill was theirs now, and they had no intention of falling ever again. And that is how the prince reclaimed his crown, not by ruling alone, but by letting the wolf share the throne. If you enjoyed seeing Julian take back his power with Kalen by his side, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a lover who shot you to save your life? Or is betrayal unforgivable regardless of the intent? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then, prompt image. Prompt. Masterpiece. Best quality. High res. 1.2. Korean manhwa style. Semi-realistic. Digital art. 2 men. BL. Yaoi. Man 1. Julian. Messy dark hair. White dress shirt unbuttoned and bloodstained at the side. Sitting on a metal chair. Defiant but exhausted expression. Distinct sharp jawline. Man 2. Kalen. Silver hair. Wearing a black tactical turtleneck and gun holster. Kneeling between Julian's legs. Looking up with intense devotion and regret. Holding a medical gauze. Background is a dimly lit industrial safe house. Rain streaking down a small window. Blue and gray color palette. Atmospheric lighting. Cinematic composition. Emotional intimacy. Sharp focus.